In 1992, a young man named Chris McCandless walked into the Alaska wilderness with no more than a rifle and a bag of seeds. Driven by the urge to challenge himself and inspired by those who have embraced the wilderness and the independence it provided. But 4 months later, his body was found at the site where he managed to survive alone for 113 days. When John was asked to do a story on his Outside magazine, he never knew what he would relate to it so strongly. This strong connection eventually compelled him to write the novel Into the Wild, which was now become the national bestseller. John is with us today in a studio to discuss Mr. McCandless and what he did, and why he did it. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me.
This is really your story to tell. Why did Chris do this? What compelled him to run away to Alaska?
Chris McCandless wanted to know what it was like to live off the land in the wilderness, choosing to go with only 10 pounds of rice, a rifle, and a book on wild plants. He found out what it was like to live in the wilderness, lonely and hard. If I was to hazard a guess, I think Chris McCandless had an arrogant vision of himself as someone who could survive with barely anything but the clothes on his back. He wanted to explore the unexplored and discover a life without responsibility, possessions, people, money, but in doing so, he went to his death. He insisted on going hardcore, but in the end, it was pure risk with little reward.
Do you think he was truly aware of the risks he was taking by doing this? Do you believe the hardship of this expedition came as a surprise to him?
I think he was fully aware there would be risks to this journey, and that is a huge reason he wanted to do this. He wanted to challenge himself, and he thought if he could do this for himself, he could do it all. But there were a few risks that only very experienced outdoorsmen, unlike Chris, would be able to guess and see coming. Some of these include the fact that the creek he crossed to get to the bus he was staying in would become a lot more aggressive and prove very difficult to cross in springtime when he was attempting to leave. And that if the potato seeds he brought along went bad and he ingested them as he did, he would become very weak and sick. This is what many believe eventually caused his demise. So yes, I do believe he knew there would be risks, but not as many as there ended up being. Sorry.
What drew you to this story? Why did this tale resonate so significantly with you?
There was an article in the New York Times that stated an unknown hiker had been found in the wilderness in Alaska, and the more I read, the more intrigued I became. This short blurb told about how they thought he'd been there for months before dying of starvation, and how they found this notebook or journal on the body of this hiker. This notebook he had showed every step of his journey, which chronicled his departure all the way to the futile, sick state he was in. They found an SOS note from when this man started to fall ill, along with a goodbye note from when he knew he would meet his demise. Hearing about his fall into darkness just got to me. I needed to find out who this man was and why he did it. And every step of the way while I was researching, I only became more and more obsessed.
Do you think Chris had some sort of death wish? Was he doing this to get some form of adrenaline?
Many people believe Chris did have some sort of death wish, or when he went on this journey he just wanted to end his life, but I strongly disagree with that. Chris just wanted the satisfaction of getting out. He wanted away with his affluent life, and he wanted to live for himself for the first time. In many cultures they have some sort of rite of passage, and I believe this is what Chris thought his journey would be to him. Risk-taking is something many young men and women feel they must do, but it comes in many forms. Whether it's driving too fast, drinking too much, or in Chris's case, it is going into the wild. It is this demographic that is obsessed with taking risks, and I feel Chris and his journey was no different. He wasn't doing this to get rich or prove anything to anyone. He was doing this for himself.
Have you ever done any type of dangerous activity or expedition similar to the one Chris went on?
Yes, I have. When I was 23, I was young and reckless. I did a very similar stupid thing to what Chris did. I had a solo expedition and climb in Alaska, which was a very dangerous thing to do. It was a climb up a mountain called the Devil's Climb. I was very lucky that I survived that. Had I not survived, people would have spoke of me in the same way they speak of Chris now, as a young man taking unnecessary risks. But it wasn't that at all. The reason I wanted to do this journey was for me. It makes little sense to say this now, but at the time I believed that if I picked a task difficult enough and I succeeded, everything thereafter would be all right. That defies logic now, but I believe that it is very similar to the reason Chris did what he did as well.
Fascinating. Thanks for joining us again, John. The book is called Into the Wild and is available in bookstores everywhere. Best of luck, John, and I hope to hear from you again soon.
Thanks.